for this series where we highlight some of our amazing 2023 Caregiver Friendly Award recipients, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a caregiver roundtable with two dear colleagues of mine, and I'm really thrilled about this, and I'm thrilled that they were able to receive a Caregiver Friendly Award. I think I would have done this anyway because they're really amazing people you need to meet. Elizabeth Miller from the Happy Healthy Caregiver. By the way, I've always, since I first heard that, I've always loved that. Happy Healthy, that's a good thing for a caregiver to be. Whose award-winning entry was for a podcast, wait for it, The Happy Healthy Caregiver, which is quite terrific. And Theresa Wilbanks from Sustainable Caregiving, whose award-winning entry was a caregiving guidebook, Navigating the Caregiver River, A Journey to Sustainable Caregiving. And I am so excited about spending at least some virtual time with you guys. Thank you for doing this, and congratulations on joining 22 years, I think, of Caregiver Friendly Award winners.
Yeah, thank you. Gary.
Thank you.
Let's start with Theresa. So tell me about your work. First of all, both of you, I love your Facebook groups. I love those pages. They're really, I'm really thrilled to be part of them, and I think you have a real great connection with the families, caregivers on your group. So I love seeing that. Tell me about sustainable caregiving, and tell me about your guidebook.
Yes, thank you, Gary. And Elizabeth, it's so great to be here with you. And I will say that my work started because I was not a happy, healthy caregiver. I was just the opposite. In fact, I came across Elizabeth's work and I didn't connect with it. I wanted to be there, so I did follow it because that's where I wanted to be, but it took me a while to get there. So I was caring for my dad, and I was, helping out, led down the slippery slope to burning out. And I realized that I was not on a sustainable path. And, I just wanted to figure out, my folks had cared for their moms, and I saw caregiving up close, but I thought, did I just, this caregiver gene skip me? Because this is really hard. And I realized that it was just hard, and my folks shielded that reality from me. So as I was deconstructing the pain, because Dad was in his mid-90s at this point,
Wow.
I didn't think I was going to outlive him. I did not think I was going to survive this experience. It was, it was that challenging emotionally. So I just deconstructed what was happening and came up with strategies just to help me feel better and just survive it. And those strategies are what I share in the book. They are what I coach caregivers on, and I do workshops and presentations, and it's all really focused around these strategies. So that's how sustainable caregiving got started, and that's what led me to write the book.
I love it. You're a multimedia caregiving expert, because now you have a guidebook that people can have in their hands. You're online, and you have your website. So what part of that do you think caregivers connect to more, or are they multimedia connecting with you?
That's a really great question, because I feel like caregiver is just like, connecting with Elizabeth's work took me a little while. I had to feel better about where I was before I could really use the self-care, strategies and practices that Elizabeth was sharing. And so I think that, and I also have it was a limited series podcast called the Self-Caregiving Strategies Podcast that goes over the strategies. And the reason I did that, along with the book and the website and the group, is because I feel like caregivers can find us at different points in their journey, and something that resonates one day might not resonate the next, or vice versa. So we really need to continue. That's why I know Elizabeth does the same. We just want to share our messages so that, the caregiver who needs us will find us at the right time. And so that's why I really feel strongly that all of these different avenues that we have, we try to use to reach caregivers are important.
Yeah, I think so too. And I've always, since I first heard about Happy Healthy Caregiver years ago, I always thought of it as aspirational. You're not telling people, well, you have to be happy or else.
No.
So
And I don't call myself that. Like I'm, people be like, oh, there's happy. I'm like, no, this is a beacon. This is like begin with the end in mind type of thing. Yes.
Yeah, aspirational. How did it start? Tell me about the podcast. I've been on them and I think they're terrific. And again, congratulations to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, first I just want to say, like, I'm a big reader, and Theresa and I are both certified caregiving consultants and caregiving.com champions. And we do a lot of similar things together. And what I love about this space, first of all, is that we have a mindset of abundance. And we have so many family caregivers that need help and attention that there's room for Theresa and I and Gary and everybody else, because we need multiple people, multiple voices, sharing the same information and spotlighting the resources. And Theresa's book is amazing. And I love it. And I recommend it often to many people. And we have a common part in that we both have a personal story with caregiving, and we had to kind of deconstruct or relearn kind of what we wanted to be. Like, I wasn't recognizing myself in the mirror. I had 3 clear examples of what unhealthy and maybe sometimes unhappy looked like, where my parents didn't prioritize their own health and happiness. And so that was kind of what ignited Happy Healthy Caregiver for me, is that I did not want to repeat this. And I knew that I needed to flip the switch and prioritize my own health and happiness. So the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast is an extension of what I believe to and want to be true for caregivers, to flip this mindset. But I honestly believe that family caregivers, like all of us, are the experts in family caregiving. And while you might have written a book and had a podcast and have a magazine and developed a documentary and all of these amazing things, there's something about knowing that you've walked through it or you're walking in it and what that can be true. So on the podcast for Happy Healthy Caregiver, you will only find people who have had personal family caregiving in their life. And what I'm hoping to do I studied broadcast journalism at Penn State, never used my education professionally in that way. And so mom and dad finally, are getting what they helped pay for with my education in the podcast, but they're extracting the caregiving and the self-care tips in real meaningful ways. And a lot of the things that Theresa writes about sustainability, like that is also the goal. Like if we could call it happy, healthy, sustainable caregiver, like because this is what makes it, this is how it happens. Like you've got to figure out, and it's not intuitive.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was just having this conversation with somebody who said, when you are about to have a baby, there's a process. There are people there. There are books. There are systems. There's doctor. Everyone's going to walk you through that. When marriage, there's process there. But for caregiving, we just that metaphorical phone call in the middle of the night. Dad's fallen. There's been an accident. The tests are back, and then you walk through this looking glass, Alice in Wonderland looking glass, where everybody's talking in acronyms, yelling at you, trying to get you to do things, or totally ignoring you. And I agree with both of you. We like to say that the caregivers need to become the CEO of Caring for Our Loved Ones, Inc. But I think your point is so well taken, Elizabeth. I have, in 27 years, I think, since we started Today's Caregiver magazine and Fearless Caregiver conferences, I think that anybody that I've ever found who have been great advocates, communicators, supporters of caregivers, you dig deep enough, there's a caregiving story there. There's something in the heart. It's not like, oh, this is a business. Anyone who walks into this area and says it's a business, I'm waiting for that clock to tick, because they ain't going to stick around for long.
No, I mean, we're certainly not in it for the money, are we, Theresa? Like, it's not like, I've done my career for the money. This is definitely for the heart. Yes, I have charged for some things to in order to make it all work, as Theresa does too. But it is definitely a labor of love. And to be honest, like there have been many times, particularly when I started the business while caregiving and working full time and raising kids, like I had no business starting this business. And but it fulfilled me. And in a lot of ways, it was self-care for me, like to, process my emotions through writing. And then that's what, the early blog posts were the early podcast episodes before I started interviewing other caregivers. And I think it's the stories that resonate with people. Like in a world of chat GBT now, like you can have chat GBT, but you're going to miss the stories that Theresa and I can tell about her dad wanting to jump out of an airplane in his 90s, and how she, had to meet him halfway in some ways.
Yeah, it was a transformational experience. And I think, Elizabeth, what I love too about us working together like we do is that, caregiving felt isolating and lonely. Starting a business supporting caregivers felt isolating and lonely. It's such a parallel, and working so hard and that, and not feeling like you're not sure, is anybody really out there sometimes appreciating what we're doing? And then they are, and we find that out. And Gary, to your point, when we have a major life event change, we have, our support system rallies around us, they're there for us. Or it changes and we have more supports. When we become a caregiver, that doesn't happen. In fact, folks distance from us. And so our support system does have to change. And folks like Elizabeth and I can be there and help, people. And I think a lot of times as caregivers, we have to support ourselves in ways we have not before.
I think that's so key. I'm so glad you brought that up, because both of you teach caregivers in your own ways, in your own communities, that caring for yourself is job one. I want to talk about that a little bit. That Theresa can continue this conversation. Talk to caregivers about why it's important, vital, job one for them to care for themselves.
It is. And I will say that it is, it's easier to prevent rather than recover from burnout, but it can be done. The reason it's harder when we're burned out is because our self-care activities can drain us even further, which, feels counterintuitive. Or for example, you go on a run and, you just are trying to exert all this built up energy, but you can't outrun your thoughts. So without cultivating some mindfulness, you're just ruminating over all the challenges and you come back maybe more stressed than when you left. I mean, there's just all of these things that can make it challenging. And that's why taking care of ourselves prevents us from getting burned out. And it does definitely help us care for our family member and be in a healthier place for that. But it's important for us to do that for ourselves. And some of these strategies, I mean, there's a learning curve and they require practice. They're not simple, and some of them are, but it's a matter of figuring out what works for us, like Elizabeth said.
Are they in your guidebook? Are there strategies like this in your book?
They are. The 12 sustainable caregiving strategies are in the book. So there's anecdotes like dad wanting to jump out of a plane at for his 94th birthday, being up on a 6-foot ladder trying to Velcro a painting to the ceiling, mixed with the strategies of how that helped me understand acceptance. It helped me learn how to not react and develop and cultivate some mindfulness. So yeah, the strategies, that's one way that I tried to share them with humor and some vulnerability and help folks figure out how they can help them. Yeah.
Excellent. And Elizabeth, I know you have, because I've heard your podcasts, I've been on your groups. You have a real energy for this, making caregivers realize that they need to care for themselves first. What are the strategies, and what have you heard from caregivers?
I think, when I first started Happy Healthy Caregiver in 2015, I was very hyper-focused in on physical self-care, right? Eating right and exercising. And that was because kind of that's what I had seen with my parents, like what was really detrimental with that. But as in this business, it's self-care is really, my definition is anything that is going to make me feel more energized and make me feel peace of mind. And so that's kind of my filter that I put in. And over the years, I have discovered really that there's 8 categories of self-care, everything from intellectual to physical to social to spiritual, emotional, and that's not just, bubble baths and weekends away. And so I want the podcast to be very pragmatic and practical. And to Theresa's point earlier, like it may not be the right fit for everybody. As we're sharing very practical and pragmatic tools. So at some point, you're an entrenched caregiver and you're deep in the weeds, like you might not be ready to kind of receive the practical, pragmatic information. But once you've accepted the role and you're like, I need this to be better. I need this to be sustainable. I need to figure out who I am again. And I want to be a happy, healthy person, a yes and, because I honestly believe in my heart, like we can be amazing caregivers and happy and healthy individuals, but it didn't happen overnight. Like for me, I started with Instagram, just holding myself accountable. And now I'm one voice. And so every caregiver is sharing what self-care looks like for them. Teresa's been on my podcast too. So if you want more of Teresa and Elizabeth, you can listen to the episode with her. But it's because what's self-care for Teresa is different than what's self-care for Gary and self-care for Elizabeth. And so people need a smorgasbord of ideas and they can try them on. And that's really what I want to encourage, is that you try it on like clothing and you're like, maybe this will work. And sometimes maybe you have to try it a couple different styles first and get used to it. And then you keep what works and then you ditch what doesn't and you try on something else.
Well, one of the things that I really enjoy about knowing both of you and both your work is that, 66.7 million caregivers in this country alone. And at some point, every one of us think we're absolutely alone. We just don't, nobody gets it. We did a Fearless Caregiver Conference in Philly with Della Reese a bunch of years ago. And it was a love fest. And she and I were on the stage and she answering questions, and there were maybe 400 caregivers in the room, and people were answering each other's questions and supporting each other. And I just felt so good about it. About 3 weeks later, I get an email out of the blue from somebody who said, I don't know how to get through this. Nobody knows what I'm going through. And she detailed her caregiving situation, which was rough. And I said, well, where do you live? I'm going to get you some support. She lived 3 blocks from where this Caregiving Love Fest with Della Reese was 2 months earlier, or 3 weeks earlier. And I'm like,
yeah,
that proves to us that we can never rest. But
at the same time, we've got to self-care for ourselves so that we can continue to go out. Like we've got to practice what we preach. And I think that's what also makes us different, is that I do pay my health first, in the morning. Like I've got my routines and my habit, and I know Teresa does too. And we hold each other accountable, as fellow carepreneurs. Like we check on each other, and to help make that. We're also brutally beautiful allies for caregiver retreats. Like we do a lot of stuff together, and we're in a lot of common groups where we can really check in on each other. And everybody needs those people.
By the way, I love carepreneurs. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
I think Teresa came up with that term for our mastermind, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
I offered it for our mastermind, but I won't say it's original to me. So yeah, I did see it somewhere, but I love it too. I think it really fits with what we're doing.
Yes.
And I do like how we look out for each other, and it's really important. And I think, Elizabeth, you've shared also that the strategies that we use, the self-care practices, they're things that help us now post-caregiving. They're crucial. So this isn't something that you give up when you stop caregiving. I did for a bit. I thought, okay, I don't need necessarily to meditate every day. I don't need these things. And then life got hard. And I thought, well, it's because I let those practices and those strategies go. And then once I started to incorporate them back in, and through the grieving process, they're helpful. So these are life skills that we're sharing and learning. And it's, it's growth through adversity is what we experienced, and what we're trying to help others just recognize.
Well, and you never know. I call myself a serial caregiver at this point. Not only now both parents and grandparents, and supporting mom as a caregiver, but people ask you, and you want to care for them as well, which is why I love that. I always say that a family caregiver needs to know there are people out there who are walking the walk, and are looking to reach out to them to support them as they do that. And I think you're right. With all the advocates now involved in caregiving, and with the amazing work both of you are doing, there's all sorts of opportunities for family caregivers to step in and get the support that fits their needs. And I'm really thrilled to know you both. I know we're talking just as we learned that former First Lady Rosalind Carter has been diagnosed with dementia. And we know how many families that she and her family have helped who are living with cognitive challenges. And so I know our thoughts our heart
Yes, she's
is,
made it a
is,
life's work, you know,
is
to
with her.
support family caregivers.
I've done a few interviews with her. I've gone to her gala, and she's just bursting with love and strength and support. It's just it was an honor to be able to spend time with her. But one of the things that she's known for in her book, Help Yourself, Help Others, that she credits to a friend of hers who told her there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who've been caregivers, those who be caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, and those who would need caregivers. And I think what you guys do, and with this whole river of, there's the word, this whole caregiver river that we're floating down, I think that you should feel comfortable and blessed that there are people in this world that now they know you or will get to know you. You're going to help them as they take on their own caregiving journey.
Yeah. And like you said, we can be caring for someone now and know that we'll be caring for other family members in the future. I'm in that situation. I see, my in-laws, and it won't be long before we're stepping in and helping out even more. And I hope that I've learned something that I can put into practice and sort of present some of the stumbles, from the past. And that's another thing that I know that Elizabeth, you as well, like to bring to folks' attention, that as you're managing the situation, think about how you can set yourself up for a sustainable, caregiving experience the next round.
I don't pretend to have all the answers. Like, I'm a current support caregiver now for my brother, who's 60 years old. He's got an intellectual and developmental disability. So much attention, is on my life, my family, and my parents. Like, he's a whole new, yes, I have a caregiving experience, but this is a whole new realm of
Right.
dealing with somebody who's neurodivergent. And it's different. It's a different, and I don't know all the resources, but I'm lucky to be in this space and to have cohorts with people like both of you, so that we can share the resources and kind of help fast track each other. So it's like, we don't necessarily have all the answers, but we might get you close to somebody who could have the answers. And I think there's a big care network out there, or care colloquium of groups, so that we can help each other. But Gary, you've been in this space a longer time, and the original pioneer of supporting caregivers. And I'm hoping you don't feel like this lonely raft anymore, that you've out in this river, that that there's other rafts in the river. And I don't know, what does that feel like for you? I'm just turning the tables a little bit, but I'm curious.
Well, it's quite wonderful. I know that when we started, Mrs. Carter and FCA, and there's Suzanne Mintz, there are a few people out there yelling, "The caregivers are coming! The caregivers are coming!" And now it's like the cavalry has come to the rescue. I was talking to somebody that at the colloquium. By the way, I went to it because I can never say the word, so I was telling them, "Thank you for putting this on, because now I can actually say that word." But who I've known for 20, 25 years, we've gone to the ASAs and the NCOAs and all different conferences, had small groups of caregiver support. We always go to dinner in the different cities. And I said, you know what? This conference with 250 or so amazing caregiver support folks couldn't have been done 10 years ago. Just couldn't have been done. 15 years ago, we wouldn't have filled a small conference room. And now, the cavalry has come, and she was in tears. It was really, it's really lovely, and it's really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think it allows the outreach to family caregivers to be extended. And I'm blessed to know you guys.
Aw, thanks, Gary.
Oh, thank you, Gary. I was sitting next to you at one of the breakout sessions, and we knew each other, but we didn't know each other we hadn't met yet. And it was just so exciting to meet you there in person. And that's something that the Care Colloquium also, it brought us together, and this sense of fellowship that we have. I just think that that's something that will continue and grow from the colloquium. And yeah, it was really
through the Whole
really
Care Network, which is the
Yes.
network that the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast is a part of. I know your limited series podcast was a part of, Theresa, and now it's expanded right into masterminds, a Whole Care Network University, and a lot of other things where like the care economy can kind of meet and collaborate together to make change. I think, if each of us kind of puts, to use the water analogy, keep going with that, is like we each can make a little splash, but if we start really splashing
in the river,
yes, we will make some serious waves. And I'm ready. Let's go.
Thank you, Elizabeth Miller. Thank you, Theresa Wilbanks. And I'll let you go back to doing everything you do to support caregivers and working in your workshop and tinkering and writing and podcasting. And it's next time we'll do this in person.